Thank you for attending this webinar this morning. I understand we've got, at the moment, we've got 83 attendees. There's probably a few more to go join us, but I need to start because Carly and I have got other things to get done this afternoon as well, so we need to get this done. So what we are today is the UK familiarisation. This is part one to do with lesson planning. One thing I'm not going to do, and it's horrible to start with a negative, I'm not going to go through licensing regulations in any great detail at all today, because it is a topic on its own that will be done next week on Thursday. So if you make a note in your diary, it's Thursday next week, which is the 7th, and it'll be 11 o'clock because Friday is a bank holiday. It's VE Day, so we're not going to do it on the Friday. So Thursday next week will be the second part of this series of webinars, which will be the licensing regulations on how you would check licenses, what you're looking for, and what is valid and what isn't valid. So that will be all done next week. I will touch on tiny bits that you need to know today, but what we're going to do is we are going to get on with the seminar now if we can. So if you can move on, please, Carly. So this is for the ADI to be able to supply training to the client who is bereft of skills, confidence or experience of driving on the left in the UK in a right-hand drive vehicle. That isn't all you'll see. I've had a few guys from Japan who were working for diabetes research place near Gatwick. They drive on the left like we do, but they came to me because they wanted to get used to traffic volumes, and also traffic signs, etc. as well. So it's not all to do with foreign license holders necessarily that can't drive on the left. And the majority of them will be driving on the right, and we've got to coax them into changing their skill set to drive on the left. If you could change, please, Carly. So, can the ADI PDI train this subject without being fleet registered? Yes, you can. Now then, let's look at the NDRTS stands for the National Driver Rider Training Standards, which are the standards that we have to use in order to meet our standards checks, basically. So 6.11 is trainer compliance to legal regulations. So yes, but PDIs, be careful that sometimes the client will come to you because they've been moved over to this country, have lived somewhere where they've had public transport, and their license would have had to have been exchanged within, or had to take a driving test within 12 months. And therefore they could be coming to you with a provisional license, which means you cannot take them on the motorways. So that's the only proviso the PDI has to watch, is the motorway training. The ADI has no problem. They can do any of this. They do not have to be fleet registered, because under the 1988 Road Traffic Act, Section 125, an ADI is able to train full license holders with their badge. The fleet register is basically an add-on that the DVSA have put together to try and enhance the skills of the trainers for the business environment. There's a lot to be desired with that register, to be honest. There's a lot more needs doing to it, and we'll be looking at that ourselves in the near future. So the first thing I say to you is, in order to meet the National Driver and Rider Training Standards for this part, I'll get this back up again. There we go. 6.12 at the bottom of the page there is a training vehicle fit for purpose, and 6.2 is designing learning programs. So you need to find out about your client in order to know what they actually need. And I advise you really to find out about their company as well. Okay, so find out, are they a full license holder with a valid license? All right, they can be trained without L plates if they're driving on their own license, because some foreign licenses can be used in this country for 12 months from the date of registration to live here. So you'll find some people will come to you, but some licenses can be exchanged, some licenses can't, and the holder would have to take a driving test within 12 months of being resident. So can they be trained without L plates? Yes, if they're on their own full license for their country, especially if it's an EU license, yes, they can be. But just look at the risk. These people do not know what they don't know until you get them to realize they don't know it. So you're going to get a lot of them coming over and saying, in my country. Well, they're not in their country. Their rules and regulations here in many instances are different, plus the fact the biggest problem is they're now driving on the left. So all of their judgment to their left will be bereft of skill. They'll be very good with the right, but they won't be so good with the left. So you have to think about the risks that can be created on the road. And although they may have a full license, it might be fortuitous to put them on L plates. Okay, so, but once you put them on L plates, you need to keep them on L plates. Okay, so although they've got a full license, it's really to protect you so other drivers can see that there could be some misdemeanors in their behavior. Ask if they used to hold a valid license. Okay, because it's quite possible that the license they used to hold is expired. Exchanges can be done up to 5 years after expiry of a previously valid full license for their country. So if it's beyond that, then they would have to have a GB provisional license. So if they don't hold a valid license, they can't drive on a license that's going through its 5-year expiry. That is only for people who, again, are in a city, they use public transport, their driving license has expired, their foreign license has expired, and therefore they have gone beyond the 5 years where the license could still be exchanged without having to take a driving test. So they might come to you with a GB provisional license because they've already exchanged it. Okay, so bear that in mind as well. Okay, find out about your client, find out what they drive. You'll find Bulgarian drivers tend to have a very, very good scope of vehicles. So although we have category B, all European countries have the same categories on their license as what we have. They're exactly the same with the same weight limits, etc. But the Bulgarians tend to have a much better handle on being able to adapt to different size vehicles within the category B. Don't see that very often in other countries, but we do. Bulgaria, they tend to, and I also drive in the snow very well as well. So next one, please, Carly.
Yeah, no problem.
So we're now looking at identity, vision, and communication. Yes, they need to have the eyesight. Their eyesight in their own country may be different to what we have, because remember, they're not all countries are European. The European eyesight regulations are the same everywhere, but non-European aren't. And therefore, the very first thing you'd need to do when you get approached for this is possibly go and see them and check the eyesight. And if the eyesight doesn't meet our standards, then you're going to have to go to the optician first. Otherwise, you could have a wasted journey. And again, find the driving experience. And it'll be at this time, and Carly alluded to this for those who sign on early, that whether you're going to have a language barrier or not. Sometimes you'll get phone calls from companies that say, we've got a driver who's come over for so-and-so, he's on work placement here, and he's going to go back to wherever he comes from. He's going to be here for 4 months. We need him driving around the country to go to other sites as well. Can you do something for us? Well, yes, you can, but you need to know what experience that guy has got. So you've got to know about the driver probably more than you do when you're doing your learners or when you're doing people who come back for refresher courses. Driver license checks, there is an online you can do for GB licenses, but if you've got anything that's not GB, you need to phone. Now, the reason I say that, I'm going to get somebody to shout me down here in a minute, but the thing is, at the moment, nothing's working very well at all, as you know, but in normal circumstances, for an EU driving license, you would phone the 0300 number I have here, and you'll go through a series of press 1, press 2, press 1, press 4 sort of thing to get through to the correct department for DVLA, okay? GB and non-EU licenses, you would need to phone the 0906 number. Now, again, I'm going to get shouted down because it is another number that starts 0122. That's about to be withdrawn, so that's why I haven't put it up there. It's going to go very soon. It's a landline number, which is cheaper than the 0906, but the DVLA are withdrawing it very shortly indeed. So, situation with license checks. The EU licenses, we're on a reciprocal arrangement with all of Europe. So if there is a misdemeanor carried out in one country, we should be able to pick that up here in this country. You'd like to think so anyway. It doesn't happen. And the reason it doesn't happen is because when an EU license holder comes to the UK under the current rules and regulations, which are likely to change on the 31st of December, but the current regulations we've got at the moment, if they're living here permanently on their EU license, they either have to exchange it for a GB license or register it with DVLA. Now, we talk about registration. In the old days, we used to have the D750 counterparts for our photo cards. What the DVLA do is they pass out a counterpart called a D9. They can be varying colors. They were blue for a long time. I think they've changed it to pink now, but it's got D9 in the top corner. And that, if an EU license holder showed you that, that means that license has been registered. So if you did a license check on that license, then any misdemeanor on that license would have been registered with the DVLA.
Howard, can I just make a point somebody's made? Is the DVLA withdrawing the 0121 number? So they're switching all their contacts to these business line numbers.
Yes, it's 0121, not 0122. Yeah, the 0121 number will eventually be withdrawn. In fact, I'm surprised it hasn't been, because they mentioned in December with a mail like they did that it was going to be withdrawn within 2 or 3 months, and that hasn't happened.
Okay, thanks, Howard.
So yes, it will be. It is there at the moment, but it will. You'll find out one day and it won't exist. That's the situation. I've got no idea when it will be withdrawn, but it is going to be withdrawn.
Okay.
Okay. So if you can move on, please. Also need to know about previous experience with these people as well. You're not necessarily going to be engaging these people to drive on the left in a car. They might be commercial with light vans and any vehicle. Now, you can only train in vehicles up to 3.5 tons. That is the limit you can do on a category B. Your ADI badge only allows you to do that. Okay, there's a little bit of leeway there with trailers on the small trailers on the back, but to all intents and purposes, generally the maximum authorized mass, that's what MAN means. Maximum authorized mass is the weight of the vehicle and its load with its driver, with a full tank of fuel and the driver's lunch, effectively. Okay, so that's what the maximum authorized mass is on a vehicle. That's the maximum weight you're able to train. So we're now going back to our national standards again. Just bear with me 1 second. Right. So 6.2 we know on our national standards is design learning programs. 6.3.1 is create a climate that promotes learning. 6.3.2 is explain and demonstrate skills. And 6.33 is coaching. So with this here, by finding out what they've got, you can work out what the program is that they need, depending on the vehicle that they're going to be driving. Now, bear in mind, for those of you who certainly are not fleet, that your vision in these vehicles, if they're light vans or other vans, SPVs as we call them, they're specialized panel vehicles, like the Renault Trafics and the Mercedes Sprinters, those sort of longer vehicles. There will be bulkheads in them, so you're not going to have any rear view mirror at all. So you might have to get mirrors that will clip onto the wing mirrors so you can see what's going on from the driver's perspective. That is quite a common thing for you to have to do. The visibility around the side of the vehicle is going to be quite limited. You may not have a choice. You may have to train in these vehicles because a company's engaged you. They will not expect you to take them out in your car under dual controls. So the lesson planning here has to be that you really, really have to get this person to understand where the risks lie, who is responsible for what. Okay. When I'm doing this type of training with these people, what I do is I get them into their yard and get them to reverse the vehicle around a bit. It could be the first time they've ever been in the vehicle, so you may have to go through all of the controls with them and go through all of the floudery checks, which is fuel, lights, oils, water, damage, electrics, rubber, and yourself. Now that comes up in other courses. We can send that out to you. I haven't expanded that on the next slide, I don't think, but we can send that out to you if you need to have that again. So it's doing the daily checks to make sure the vehicle is roadworthy, and they must be able to do this. There may be different regulations they have in their home country, but we do need to make sure that that they do understand how to check the vehicle to make sure it is roadworthy, and also include that the inside glass needs to be clean. It's awful when you're in these vehicles with dirty inside glass, with a low sun. It looks like you're driving into a fog, and it's going to be difficult enough for these drivers to be driving on the left when they're used to driving on the right. Okay, so I'm going to go through in a second what the dexterity levels are they need. I'll do that in just a second. I know you're waiting for that to come, but the vehicles, again, for your planning, previous experience must be known so that you can do a transference of knowledge to them in the vehicles that you're going to be training in. So if they can go through the competence of being able to handle a vehicle of that length and that width, then the transference of driving on the left-hand side of the road is going to be a lot easier for them. So where you can in your planning, you would need to use transference of knowledge where you possibly can. Make sure the vehicles are roadworthy as well. Don't be pressurized to taking a vehicle out with bulbs missing or damage on the vehicle that prevents the steering wheel from turning properly, or the vehicle cannot be controlled into its proper position. Next slide, please.
Oh, sorry, Howard. Caught me on the hop there.
Yeah, wake up, Carly, wake up.
Just emailing to people who say they're having trouble with the screens. I'm emailing the presentation over, so I'm multitasking, sorry.
Okay, all right. Okay, so reflection and underpinning of knowledge. Really and truly, if somebody is going to be driving on the left and they've always been used to driving on the right, we've got a major change of behavior. And it's very difficult to change anybody's behavioral traits, as we well know. The GDE matrix goes into people that have different statuses, etc., and the way they behave. You'll find that the behaviors of the people driving, a lot of the time they want to try to impress you that although they are in a strange environment, they are doing something called norming and storming. Now, that is where they have to find their niche within your coaching and within your tolerances of how much you're going to allow them to do. Worst thing you can do with these people is to over-instruct them. You must allow them a little bit of rope to be able to do things. And the way you're going to start thinking about whether things are right or wrong is whether you get some sort of an emotional feeling of what they've just done. For example, driving on the road and you think they're driving too close to parked traffic on the left-hand side. Now, if you start twitching and you think, hang on a minute, something is wrong. And that's because in our bodies, we have transcenders, which means that we use information from one side of the body to make something on the other side of the body work. So in this instance, we're talking about the judgments to the left when they've always been used to using the left-hand side of their brain to judge for the right. Now we're asking them to transpond that. And that's difficult for them to do. So we've got to give them a bit of a chance to be able to do this. So give them some time before they even go on the road. Ensure they understand what the controls do, because some of the countries you will be training people from, and I don't want to sound rude here, but the African nations and India and Pakistan and Bangladesh tend to have much older vehicles on their roads. I mean, it's nothing to see Austin Cambridge A35s, which were built in 1955, still driving around on an Indian road. So there's no technology in there. So it could be a situation where you're going to have to upskill the technology and explain the technology processes in the vehicle that you're actually training in, because they won't have a clue. So you've got to give them a time in your session to do familiarization of the vehicle. And this is why when you're doing UK familiarization, it is not good for anyone to talk you into doing an hour. That is never, ever going to work. You're back to the old adage, they've got a set of keys, they've got a license, off they go. The risks are too high for that. You put yourself at tremendous risk if you do not give some pushback to the organisation and say, I'm sorry, this guy's going to need longer than this. We've got to familiarise them with the vehicle, everything in it, and also we've got to familiarise them with driving on the left. Now, the next slide is going to go into the meat and guts of this, really. So
just on the vehicle knowledge kind of thing, Howard's talking about developing economies where, some of the vehicles on the road in the wider population. Obviously, we know that India and places like that, what we call the BRIC emerging economies, are developing, some cutting edge standard technology, and there are some new car brands coming from those. But what we're mentioning there is kind of the wider population, what's on the road at the moment, rather than the more affluent elements of population who might actually have newer cars. But there is also an issue with even, and forgive me for saying this, drivers, trainers' knowledge of current technology and emerging technology on vehicles. We ran a conference a couple of years ago where we had an expert in the area of vehicle technology, and I was pretty surprised, as I think some delegates were, at some of the gaps in knowledge, and some of the feedback was, well, that's not on the average trainer's car. But actually, as our cars get more sophisticated and things become more standardized, as technology becomes more normalized, these cars are coming with it as standard. It's not add-ons or just on expensive cars. So what we're going to do is probably do a webinar in a couple of weeks on kind of vehicle technology to update everybody's knowledge about what's already on there. It doesn't matter that it's not on your car. It might be on the car that pupil buys as soon as they leave you. So having that working knowledge and talking about things that might happen, you already do that with scenarios you're not able to simulate in driver training. The same thing has to apply to vehicle knowledge as well, is having that knowledge to pass on. So we'll try and give you some pointers on that, and the kind of good, quick definitions for you to be able to pass on to your students, and maybe some kind of lessons on that as well. Sorry, Howard.
That's okay. Well, to follow off what Carly's saying here, it's understanding the terminology of what some of this stuff is, because some of it is the same stuff dressed up with different names, and you need to be able to identify that is the case. So what I'd say to you there really is an
important point, Howard. When we actually challenged a few tables at that conference in November a couple of years ago, people were able to tell us what things were, as in, I know what ABS stands for, or I know what this acronym stands for. They weren't necessarily able to explain in a clear way that a layman like a pupil would understand actually what the benefit, but also what the risks of some of this technology were. So, for example, if people place too much faith in a function on a car and they default or abdicate responsibility to it because they think it does everything, it'll just kick in and drive the car in some instances, then we'll have more accidents because people have too much faith. So we have to be able to explain the pros and cons of the new technology that's on car, and when it is automated or autonomous almost, or when it's not, it's assisted driving rather than autonomous driving.
Okay, well, we've got 115 of you on this at the moment, and I can just move aside from the UK familiarisation for just 1 second to help you with this, because you will also get some of the delegates that come to you, especially from the emerged countries in Europe, that will know more about technology than what you will. So I'm going to say to you, when this lockdown's all finished, why don't you go and offer yourself to the new car showrooms and say, have you considered doing the familiarisation in these cars? These people buy them new, and very often the sales force do not go out and do a full induction on those vehicles. So perhaps you could hire yourself in there, let them take you out and show you how it all works, and you be their go-to guy when someone buys a new car and charge. Now, there's a guy at Gatwick does that with 3 or 4 of them, and he gets a lot of work from it. But if you're doing this work for UK familiarisation and you get, for instance, somebody from Germany, the Germans are very up together with technology, and you don't want to be in a situation where you're in a brand spanking new German van and you say to them, well, I'm not sure what that is there, and they tell you what it is. That's really embarrassing. So offer yourself out to the forecourts. and say, look, if you can show me everything on these vehicles here, can I be your go-to guy? So when someone wants to buy this vehicle, when they want to go through a proper full induction and go out on the road with it for all the technology, can I be the man that does it for you? And just see, if they give you a no, you haven't lost anything.
Or woman, or non-binary gender.
Oh, woman. Sorry, beg your pardon. Yes, for all women. Yes. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. So, talk about underpinning knowledge. We're talking about behaviour changes, and we take a long time to adapt to our surroundings. Let's just take the COVID. I mean, we've all been on lockdown, and I know people are pulling their hair out now who've got big gardens in the back, who've done all their decorating, they've washed their car 50 times, they've done everything they can possibly do to tidy the house, so they've done their spring cleaning, and they're now really scratching for things to do. So just spare a thought for the people who are in small flats like Mill Hill in London, where they can't even get the kids out, etc. So it does take a while for us to adapt to a new thing. We don't like change. And what we were doing is asking these people to change the way they drive. The dexterity will be the same, except they'll be using a different part of their body. So 6.4.1, manage road environment. So if you can move to the next slide, please.
Yeah.
So we're looking at dexterity. We're looking at the physical motor skills. That means how the body reacts to the signals from the brain to complete a task. So for instance, you've got left-hand gear changing, where they're used to driving and changing gear with the right. That's for people who haven't got automatics, of course, but still, that gear lever, if it's not console mounted, will be between the driver's seat and the passenger seat. They'll be having to use their left hand for that. But the thing is, we produce something called muscle memory. So we automatically change gear and know where third is. And if we want to go from third to first, we put the brakes on, bring the speed down to a walking pace and go to first gear. We can do that with our right hand, so with our left hand, because that's what we do. But these people have been doing it with their right hand. So they've got to train the other side of the body. They've got to train a new muscle memory for this. And this is really quite important that you give them the time to do this. Just sit there with the engine off and let them change gears, just like you would do with a student on their first lesson for doing controls. You do have to go back to those steps, and it's not over instructing, it's giving them a chance to get dexterity in their body so they can change without the steering wheel darting the car across the road. It's very important you let them do it. Operation of stalks on either side of the steering wheel. They could be the other way around. Seatbelt operation is going to come across their body from the right to the left. They're used to it coming from left to right. And also, we've also got the situation of, now where am I looking at? Windscreen wiper sweeps, for example. Sometimes they're used to a windscreen wiper sweep that will delay and come back on the left-hand side, or also on the right-hand side. But because they're now over here, it could be on the wrong side for them, so it could disorientate them altogether. So it's something else that they need to get used to as well. And all these things, you might think, hang on a minute, what's the big deal? The big deal is if they get distracted by something and they lose their competence, they can cause an accident. And that's the problem they have. They become a risk because the muscle memory hasn't got there and the dexterity hasn't yet sunk in. Okay. Now, we haven't yet spoken about driving on the correct side of the road. So you must give them the chance first to set themselves down in the vehicle, get them to adjust the mirrors. Remember, they can be adjusting their central mirror, if they've got one, with their left hand, not their right. They've got to start looking at changing their exterior mirrors, whether they be electrical by hand. That's going to be different to them as well, because they're going to be seeing a different zone of vision in those mirrors. They're not used to it being on the right-hand side of the vehicle. It's all new to them. Okay, so these sort of things we have to plan for. We have to plan the time for all of this. And I'm just looking at 6.41 comes under managing the road environment. 6.3.3 coaching. 6.3.2 explain and demonstrate skills. 6.3.1 create a climate that promotes learning. You can't promote learning as you give them time to be able to settle themselves down. Designing learning programs is what you've got to do for them, but you've got to go back to baby steps in some respects, just a little bit without over instructing, to get them to be able to use the dexterity to operate that vehicle where you want them to put it. If you can move on, please, Carly.
No problem.
So, as I mentioned earlier on, their rules and regulations in many instances will be very much different to ours. The highway codes across Europe are not, well, the signs are quite regular, but the highway code rules and regulations aren't. I mean, we can talk about the regulations for being on a roundabout in France. I mean, I don't understand the situation they've got there, where they allow left turns to go first on a roundabout. I mean, that's just incredible. Where all the traffic has to stop in a roundabout for someone to turn left. That's just I can't understand it. But that's the sort of thing that they'd be used to. So you will hear your clients say, "In my country," an awful lot. That's what you'll hear them say, an awful lot, "in my country," because that's the only thing they can refer back to. So what you do is you use that as the learning curve, and you say to them, okay, you understand in your country that's what you do, but here we have to do it like this because, and you've always got to have a reason why we're doing it that way. And the reason can't be because it's the law. It's got to be a valid reason as to why we are doing it this way, because if they haven't got understanding, they've got nothing. So driving on the left creates its own situation of judgment to the left because they're sitting in the right-hand side of the vehicle. We spoke about the transponders and transcenders in the brain, etc. So one of the things you will be doing quite a bit of is pushing the steering wheel over to the right to avoid close proximity issues to the left. They won't be so bad with oncoming traffic. That won't be quite so bad for them because they can see it right in front of them. But on the left-hand side, they will lose a lot of their judgment. And this is where you've got to be a bit careful to take them to places, explain what you want them to do, go through the situations of driving to conditions. And there's very few other countries explain anything about driving to conditions. And I know a lot of driving instructors, they trip over themselves by saying, oh, it's when the weather changes, and it isn't. Driving to conditions is 3 conditions we drive to, is space, vision and visibility, and adhesion. Now, if we've got those 3 things covered, space, have we got the clearances? Can we get through the gaps? Are we going at an appropriate speed to be able to slow down for the gap we've got so we don't hit things? The visibility, can we see the zones of vision? Can we see into the junction we're turning into? Can we see out of it? Can we see over the brow of the hill? Can we see past the vehicle we're following? Are we following too close? And the adhesion is, especially in commercial vehicles, are we upsetting the load or the passengers? It's not all to do with potholes. If you've driven on a road where there's tree roots and they're going underneath the tarmac and those roots start to rot, then the road starts to subside. And that's where you get the undulations in the road and the vehicle starts bouncing. And then you start braking, you get the torsion bars start doing what they shouldn't do on your suspension, and the vehicle leaps. And that's what we have to be careful of in these situations here. So driving to conditions, if any one or combination of the 3 conditions is compromised, then we must reduce the speed. And you need to get that into them very early on in the drive. And that will help them understand that when they're driving and they look at the speedometer, they're not driving to kilometers per hour. They're driving to miles per hour. And on the UK vehicles, that should be the outermost part of the speed dial. Kilometers will be on the inside. Miles per hour on the analog ones will be on the outside. Of course, there's digital ones, of course there is. But you have to get them to understand that when they're driving, doing speeds, we're looking at miles per hour here and not kilometers, because they're going to be so used to doing kilometers per hour. Positioning when turning right and turned right. So that's emerging and major to minor, etc. In their own countries, when they drive on the right, their immediate danger at a give-way line, if they're emerging from minor to major, is left, right, left. Here, because we drive on the left, it's right, left, right. And they're the minimum checks they have to make. As you well know, I'm not going to try and teach you to suck eggs here, but That is one major factor that we have got to get through to them, that our traffic is coming from a different direction in the initial danger zone in this country than it does from where they are driving currently, where they've been driving. So we need to make sure that when they turn out, that if they're doing a right turn, that they don't immediately turn and end up going on the wrong side of the road, that they have to delay the turn doing a right, which is what they used to do, doing a left. So when they were driving on the right, when they're doing a left turn, they would have delayed to go across the other side of the road. They're doing it the other side here. They're doing it to the right, a slight delay, so they go across the road and turn. So again, it's transcenders and transponders again. They have to get used to that. Their steering ability might be a little bit lax to start with, because you're trying to get muscle memory into their bodies. Roundabout rotation, well, we're clockwise, not anti-clockwise. So again, they're giving away to the right. Their judgment to the right-hand side is alien to them. They're only judging from the left. And again, they still must make sure they look to the right and not look to the left. Clearances, we've pretty much mentioned. Pedestrian activity, of course, the pedestrians, they sometimes do their own things and won't look anyway. But because they're driving on the left, they should be expecting people to come out from the left. They should be able to see people crossing from the right or jaywalking, but they've got to have more attention to the left as opposed to attention to the right. So all these things, again, need to be looked at and given them time to adapt.
Howard, Jim. Hi, Jim. Hope you're well. Jim's making the comment that a lot of his clients, he finds they lose orientation on leaving car parks in particular. And like that. I mean, we see normal drivers losing orientation when they enter car parks and when they leave them, as it is, not, kind of never mind people who are not used to our system. So that's quite a good point.
It is indeed. And what I'd say there, if you're actually doing your initial training with them in the car park to get them familiarised with the vehicle, is one thing to say to them is keep the centre lines by your door. Now, not literally, but they've got to stay to the right of your door and not to the left of the passenger door. So they've always got the curb on the left and the line on the right. And that's how I tend to say to them. And then I then guide them as to the proper positioning between those 2 points where they should be following along that part of the road. And that's one way of doing it. But there's a whole host of things that you'll probably find that could be bespoke to each individual person, depending on what they did in their driving test. I mean, I believe the Israeli driving test, I trained 2 Israelis about 12 years ago. And one of the guys said to me, the driving test is go down a track, at the end of the track, turn round. You had to come along the same marks that you made with your tyres. You did a left turn, a right turn. You did a reverse around the corner, and that was it. The test lasted 11 minutes, and that was it. So the dexterity of some of these people, you're going to be putting them into situations they may never have been into before, especially into some of the more backward countries. Don't want to be just disparaging to anybody at all, but some countries are more up together than others in terms of road safety. So you've got to start thinking quite laterally as to what acumen do these people actually have, from what experience they bring in with them. There could be sometimes you may have to do more than one session on this. It could be a situation where you start getting them to you give them the tools to do what you want to do, and then go back a week or 2 later and reassess. So you give them time to underpin the knowledge that you've given them, give them a chance to do it, and say to them, here's a phone number, any problems, give me a ring or email me, whatever. Okay, next slide, please.
Okay, any questions on my...
Any questions at the moment?
I think we're picking up the questions as we go. I'm just briefly checking back. People were asking about, can we re-say the DVLA numbers? I've popped those on the chat. I've pasted them onto the chat for you. But this presentation will be recorded, or is being recorded. So as soon as you it goes into the webinar section of the DIA Academy later on this afternoon. We've uploaded it. So you'll see the full presentation there, and you'll be able to grab the numbers from there too. But I have just popped them in the chat for people. But that's it for now. you can carry on, I think.
Okay. So email support@driving.org for help and advice for anything you need. We have got the help desk, normally myself and Olivia. Olivia's not around at the moment, but she'll be back quite soon. And we can help you. So even in this situation, if you get, I have a lot of phone calls come through from ADIs who get this as a call and they think, hang on a minute, this is complete alien to me. What have I got to do? Well, you've now got some tools to be able to put together some lesson planning. So bear in mind that the government have mentioned that the crops will not come out the ground during the summer unless we get an influx of people in to come and do it. So there's going to be people who will be coming over on foreign licenses that may need to have some training coming. So listen out for them. And now hopefully you've got more tools to be able to deal with their needs. Okay. We are able to help you through this. Any things that you get, you might get some information of the client that tells you they're used to driving different vehicles. We can help you with that as well, so you can help plan what you need to do. If you go on to the next one, please, Carly. We've got the online courses at the Academy. There's a number in there at the moment. We've got, I know there's a first aid course in there, and there's a few others as well. And perhaps Carly might want to explain what they are at the moment.
So the webinars that we've recorded over the last few weeks include things like risk management. That's a taster, really, to highlight the key areas of risk in your profession. It occurs to me, as someone who isn't necessarily as expert or as Howard, Olivia, Karen, and our other driver trainers in technical driver training, but has a background in wider risk management, financial, kind of compliance, medical, lots of other arenas. It strikes me, particularly when I'm dealing with court cases that AGIs get themselves embroiled in or find themselves victim of, CCJs, integrity interviews under fraud and integrity, all those kind of things. That's the huge range of challenges we have across the help desk for our members, tribunals, all that kind of thing. Is people are very focused on specific risks, which I feel are the known risks, like road risks, things like that, license removal for standards check failures, those kind of things. But it's the things that come and bite us on the bum, the ones that we're not thinking about, and therefore we're not doing anything about mitigating and managing, that are sometimes the most serious ones. So I referenced a moment ago about CCJs. We have people who find that not only have they got a CCJ, but they've also got Jackie Turlin writing to them saying this is not fit and proper behaviour and conduct, and we're going to remove you from the register because it's a pupil dispute. That's why you got the CCJ. So, we wanted to think more widely about the risks that you will incur. And this has been obviously a very big one that no one really expected to hit in this manner. So that presentation identifies the key risks in your business and in your teaching and in your general professional life, and starts to look at solutions and things you could do to manage them. So that's one thing. We've got the webinars on things like first aid for kind of first responder at the side of the road. We're just looking at another series of things. We did one on the key worker register, which gives lots of information on training key workers at this time. We did that one last week. Howard and Olivia also did one on engaging with your pupils, because obviously, it sounds strange, but as a marketer, I can tell you this, that it's not actually a bad time to market your business, because people are more aware and opening up things like emails and mail. Hit rates for email campaigns have gone through the roof across all types of industry. Attendance at things like webinars and virtual training is going through the roof across industries at the moment. So raising visibility, you won't necessarily get customers out of it, but raising visibility is important. I mean, when I say customers, you might get new customers, but you might not get them buying at this point, but at least you're raising brand awareness. And engaging with your pupils and keeping them retained is really important. So Howard and Olivia's seminar looks at what you can do to keep your pupils engaged and retained. And obviously, if you've got test ready pupils who want to, who you'll need to refresh straight after lockdown is over, they will need to be engaged with most of all to keep them current and keep them updated. So that webinar is really useful. But generally, I'm interested in what other webinars people would like us to do. So we're very happy to put them together. I'm going to be doing one on Love Your Standards Check. It was a free workshop we were doing in several locations in the UK just before lockdown occurred. So we can translate that one quite easily to a webinar. That's about the benefits of standards checks and also how to deal with your fears, your concerns, and turn them into ways that you will positively engage with that process. I'm definitely going to do one by some of the reactions on here today about, not me personally, but on vehicle tech, because I think it's a really important thing that even if you know yourself what it does in principle, it's about being able to communicate that in a pithy way to a layman so they understand its benefits, but really importantly, they understand its risks as well. I was at a really, really good seminar a few months back with somebody from Jaguar Land Rover who said one of their fears is that if people are already seeing assisted technology as almost autonomous, as in they think it does more than it does, what's it going to be like when we get to the autonomous stage? And people are already abdicating responsibility to what is assisted technology. It's not going to take over, but they seem to think it does for some reason. So there's a safety aspect to knowing what each thing does on a car as well. But if you want to let us know what you would like us to cover, we're very happy to develop. What I'm very, very fortunate here is my team is extremely agile and they are very good at working, beyond the normal working hours to get new presentations together, new learning materials. And we're very different, I suppose, from other organizations in that we have expertise that is not just solely driver and rider training. It's also wider education, marketing, legal, finance. So we're able to pull things together. And if we don't know the answers aren't expert enough, we can always get a speaker in who does that. So please either pop on the chat function now the kind of ideas of things that you'd like us to cover, or let us know by email as well, and we're very happy to do those for you. As I said, if we haven't got the intel, we'll go out and find that and we'll construct a new presentation from that as well. For those of you who are in fleet, we're working very closely with Driving for Better Business, which is Highways England, a key partner of DIA's on a lot of road safety activity. So we're going to be producing quite a lot of materials for fleet trainers and fleet managers about getting fleet back on the road. So things like vehicle maintenance, getting drivers ready to drive again as well. So it's worth thinking about those topics if you're in that world. But generally, we'll also do a webinar in the next few weeks about drivers returning to the road, learners as well as, full license holders you might be training, because a lot of people you've been training have had a massive break now in their learning, and there's things that we need to make them aware of in terms of their risk as well. But have a cruise around the DIA Academy and you'll see the courses that we've made free at the moment, and also obviously all the webinars are free as well. So see what appeals to you. I've just had some contact from you guys on the chat here. Webinar about dealing with insurance companies. I'll make a note of that as well. Again, as I said, I will be talking about financial assistance issues in the video that I'll make shortly after this, and we'll send out tonight with our newsletter. But generally, if there's an area of knowledge you think we can provide, then let us know and we'll develop some kind of resource for that.
Okay, so I'm looking at the chats here, and there's a lot of good information we pass to each other here, which is absolutely excellent. The thing I want to say now is that next week, which is Thursday, which is the license regulations, if you're going to be registered for that, I'd like you to have your driving licenses handy, please, because I need you to refer to them for things that I'm going to be saying in that webinar. Normal time, 11 o'clock. It will be from 11 till 12, and there'll be a lot more to cover in that than what we've covered today. So it'll be a bit more of a comprehensive webinars, a lot more slides to it, a lot more information. So of course it'll be recorded and it will go on to the Academy, so you will be able to get hold of it during the following week. Like this one will be put on the Academy next week when Matt has done what he's got to do with it. He'll get up on Academy for us, so you'll be able to access it at DIA Academy /webinars. That's very, very easy to find, and they're there for your leisure. So if you want to look at it again, you can. Next week, licenses, be foreign licenses, EU licenses. It will be designated countries, all sorts of things like that will come through to this. to help you to get familiar, not just for doing UK familiarisation, but if you're doing fleet as well, then you get a strange thing come up, or whatever it is. We can have a chat about that next week. Okay, so
Susan Edwards, for example, yes, we can put something in the magazine. People are asking, as well as webinar, can we put it in the magazine? Because we know a lot of you use our magazine as a CPD resource. It's a useful go-to guide. So we'll just give Howard another job of writing this into some kind of feature in the near future as well. But it's always useful to know, not just for webinars, what magazine articles people would like us to do as well.
Thanks, guys. You just leave me to do that. That's okay.
You will
sit there at home and I'll do it for you. That's okay. I don't mind. No, you sit there. It's okay.
No, we're very happy. We're very happy to. I would make the point that obviously, like a lot of organisations, there's sometimes maybe a slight delay in us sending things out to you on some of our services at the moment, because we've got people working from home, we've got people off sick. So our resources are quite limited, but we are trying to fire on as many cylinders as we can. But just ask you to bear with us sometimes if we're not as on top of things as we should be. And just to reiterate, for those who are kind of in fostering both worlds or one or the other, I'm going to be designing over the next week or so a post COVID-19 toolkit for driver and rider trainers, and there will be a specific one for fleet as well as other areas of driver training, because we've been getting so many questions and so many queries. There's so much happening that we wanted to gather it all into one place, so you're able to refer to that as you think about getting back to normal work, as it were. And also the toolkit will look at what is going to be the new normal, because obviously this is a question in many areas of our lives. So we're going to specifically look at that in terms of driver and rider training. What will be our new normal going forward from here? So that's it from me, Howard. Anything else for you to add?
No, I thank everybody for your attention. Keep safe, everybody, and hopefully we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for spending the time with us, and keep well, keep safe, and hope to see you all soon. Obviously, socially distanced, shame, but there we go. That's our new normal. Have a good weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.